A word from our sponsors. Whether or not Google ever decides to deprecate cookies, they continue to loom over us, putting future revenue growth in doubt. LiveIntent's Hero, Helping Identity Reveal Opportunity, offers a solution by transforming non-addressable audiences into addressable inventory using first-party data. Hero is scalable, interoperable, and integrated with major industry players, providing a robust framework for navigating the post-cookie era. See how Hero can help you quickly unlock your inventory at LiveIntent/Hero. That's LiveIntent/HIRO. This is a disclosure. Please note that all guests featured on the AdTechGod pod are invited to participate. They do not pay in any form to appear on the show. However, guests may be sponsors of the AdTechGod community, the AdTech forum, or other product offerings. Welcome to the AdTechGod pod, your window into the world of advertising technology and the people behind it. I'm your host, AdTechGod. Welcome to today's episode of the AdTechGod pod, where we chat with dynamic leaders and innovators in our industry. Kristina Prokop was the CEO and founder of IOTA, a global provider of privacy-compliant audience data for marketers and advertisers. IOTA's groundbreaking work in delivering high-quality, actionable data has made a significant impact on our industry. So much so that in November 2021, it was acquired by Dun Bradstreet for an impressive $165 million. One of my favorite aspects of hosting this podcast is the opportunity to speak with entrepreneurs who share their unique journeys, milestones, and challenges they've overcome. So I'm excited to meet Kristina today and learn more about what keeps her moving forward and what she envisions as the future of audience data. Kristina, welcome to the AdTechGod pod.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And I love the fact that I interview people that have been part of, sizable acquisitions. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about how that all happened, how that changed things for you and IOTA. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to digging into it.
It's a journey, and happy to answer any questions you have. And, I think what's so interesting, and this is what I really love about this podcast is, as you mentioned, these journeys are so different. No matter what sale you hear about process, no matter whose career trajectory you hear about, there is no one way. And I think it's so fascinating to hear these different paths that everyone takes. And to be honest, when I look back very early in my career, I think that's one of the things that I didn't understand. I kept looking for, how do I get there? There must be a formula. Do I need an MBA? Do I need this? Do I need that? And then I'm going to get there. And then finally, when you get to a certain point, you realize it all doesn't matter. There are 1,000 different permutations of your way to where you want to go. So yeah, I think that's the fun part about this podcast that I really enjoy.
It's funny, there's no instruction manual for success. I think I tried to find that too. Okay, I'll join a company and I'll try to get a promotion every 2 years and eventually I'll get to that point. And then I realized nope, the path is definitely not linear. Yeah. It's all over the map. And sometimes you just got to take risk and follow your gut and go with it and see if it works. Kristina, question for you. You obviously are the co-founder and CEO of IOTA. Now you're part of Dun & Bradstreet. Can you tell me how you came up with the IOTA concept and what made you want to build that company?
Yeah. So I was working for a company called Adify, and that was a platform. Most people, unless you were very specific in the space, you would know, but it was a platform for building vertical ad networks. It was like a technology, but also all of the back office services behind it. And that got bought by Cox. I think it was about 2009, I want to say. And what happened was, I was already working internationally. So I'm based in Berlin, Germany. I had moved to Germany in 2000. And actually, the founders of Adify were the founders of the first company I worked for, a company called Flycast back in the day in San Francisco. So it was a great run at Adify. We really loved the business, loved the people. We got bought by Cox. And what came clear very quickly was international was not going to be a priority for them just because they're a very US focused business. So it was at that time that the international, I was a part of the international management team of Adify. And we had a really unique combination of, between the people that started the company, in between our geographic locations and our skill sets, that we thought, my gosh, if anybody can pull off something global, that reaches across multiple markets, we can do this. Like, we have a really good infrastructure and, skill set and experience set and everything else. And so as we looked at what that might be, at the time, it was when data started becoming a very fast growing business. So if you at the time of, Blue Kai and X-Late's trajectory. So what we saw is, and all of us had worked for US based companies internationally for many years. And so what we just saw coming was, you saw the writing on the wall that data was going to be incredibly important to so many different aspects of digital marketing and advertising. And so what we really did is we set out to be the go-to data company for basically really everywhere outside of the States. So originally we had built the business across Europe, Asia, and Australia, New Zealand. And the US was actually then the last market that we came into off the back of all of the relationships and the platform distribution partners and everything that we had built outside of the States. It was the right timing. It was, going into the data space is something that I will never regret. I love the data space and I find it fascinating. The thing that really excited me about going into the space was, I've worked in a lot of different areas of digital advertising, whether it's search or ad networks or ad serving. And, I really saw data as one of the only areas that can really transcend and cross all of those different disciplines, which made it so interesting for me. So long story short, that's how we originally founded the business. And like I said, then it eventually grew to be a very large business in the States as well. And here we are today, acquired and a part of Dun Bradstreet.
When you think about the expansion that you went through and moving from country to country, I think sometimes we view Europe as Europe, and we don't necessarily view Europe as, a dozen or more countries with different regulations and privacy restrictions. Did you find that challenging moving across, I guess, the European continent, opening up offices and applying the right audience segments and the right collection practices? Because I would assume it's totally different in every country you're in.
Yeah, so it is in some ways, yes, and in some ways, no, mainly just because we had all been working in these markets where I'm based in Berlin, one was based in Singapore, and one was based in Sydney. We knew the layout of these markets and the nuances of these markets pretty well. So in that respect, we knew what we were getting into. Now, managing that, of course, yes, it is complicated, and you have to pick and choose your battles or where you see the most opportunity for the amount that you have to invest. And, what that then comes down to, because it's not only the privacy and things like that, the go-to-market, and if you look at the data assets that you have to bring on board that are interesting to those local markets, those really vary, right? So all of it has to be localized. And the challenge is always finding a way to do that where you can also scale it. Classic example, if you have Experian is a huge name in consumer data in many, many markets, but in Germany, they're here, but they're not the currency, right? There's a company called Schober here. There's other companies in Australia, New Zealand. And that's when you look at data supply, you have to adapt it. When you look at go to market, you have to adapt it. When you look at what does employment look like in these markets, that's also, a big one that you have to take into consideration. And I think, the other big thing that I think is always so interesting about working in international markets is the level of readiness and market maturity and the budgets they have to invest are also vary greatly. And that's something else you have to take into account. So, yes, it is complex, but, I think if you're just smart about where you invest your time and your resources and where the opportunities are, you can do that effectively.
I would think all of those play such a huge part. You're right. I think employment is one part. Regulation and ease of opening up a business is another. I would also assume culture plays a role in this, right? Culture, every country has a little bit different of a business culture when interacting with people and securing contracts and partnerships. Some are probably a little bit more relationship-based. Some are very, very paper-based and very much so stringent legal processes. So I would assume every country you go to is so different in terms of how you interact, how you talk, and how you present to clients.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was interesting. We also, we made some assumptions when we were starting to making our decisions about where to invest and where to build first. We did make some decisions that were the wrong ones. And primarily, I think what we didn't anticipate in the very beginning. So you have to remember, this is in 2010, pretty early in the stages, particularly international of any sort of audience targeting or data applications. And for example, in Germany, since I'm based here, we tried to go pretty heavy in Germany. And what we didn't realize is, particularly at the time, all of the growth in the data space was linked to the adoption of programmatic. And what we didn't really see coming is that Germany, because of some nuances of the way the tightness of the media companies here, and it took them a very long time to adopt programmatic at the same rates that other countries did. And so what happened is we had this great data offering, but we couldn't get it integrated and sold anywhere because nobody was using programmatic. So we had to rethink that one. Eventually now the German market is a fantastic market for us, but you don't always get it right the first time when you try to build out and look at what markets are really going to be winners for you.
It's funny because, having worked with international markets myself at some point in my career, I won't say when or who or why, but I experienced a lot of that too, thinking that, other countries are just as advanced in digital advertising as we are here, or they're following the same trend and in the same timeline. And sometimes the reality was that there was a little bit of a lagging factor to it. So what we're doing here, we might be 2 or 3 years ahead of another market. And we would enter and we would realize very quickly, oh man, they're not even buying this way yet. Like this is a market education strategy now, rather than a, product pitch strategy. So I know I experienced that myself, and it was challenging, but it was fun because you could go in and educate and then really establish those relationships, which, panned out to be long-term contractual partnerships.
I'm assuming it was a good experience working abroad. What was the biggest takeaway that you had from working across other markets?
I was young. I think for me, it was just exploring and seeing all the different places. It was also fun I worked a lot with agencies directly. So for me, it was just fun seeing how media buyers looked at various, vendors and suppliers, and how their evaluation process was quite different across the board. So some were very simple, like, hey, yeah, somebody said you were great. Let's work together. Others were like, we don't know who you are. And until we know who you are as a person, we don't necessarily want to work with you. So it's very relationship based. I think that was the biggest part for me. I think for me, it was just learning how each agency, even if it was like a group M, but had an office there managing, either local brands or just national spend based on their like global ad budget that they had for that brand. I think it was interesting to see how they divvy up the budgets differently, how they focused on different media. Some were very heavy on digital. Some were like, no, we love billboards here. Like we want every billboard on every corner.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. Then you get into some markets in Asia where, you're looking at, nobody's targeting display ads or anything because nobody's on a computer. They're all on, this has been for years and years already. They're all mobile. I found out, thank goodness, pretty early what it is that really excites me the most. And so I had worked, like I said, I started in 98. So kind of rags to riches. So I started as the receptionist at this ad net, like one of the first ad networks, Flycast, because I had my degree in biology and I knew that I didn't want to go back to grad school and spend my next 3 years in the lab. So I just moved out to San Francisco with my best friend and started jobbing around. And of course, 98, the chances that you end up in this industry were not slim. I was fascinated by this industry and got sucked in pretty fast. And I always say, sometimes I have a love-hate with the industry because on the one hand, it is so dynamic and so fast-paced, but then sometimes I just wish it would slow down. I wish we would, could catch our breath for a few moments, but it provides so much opportunity and so much growth and personal growth and professional growth. And yeah, so I really do love the industry. I moved with that company, Flycast, to Germany in 2000, and the company imploded the whole industry, right? So like Flycast was bought by CMGI, a big holding company, which then merged a bunch of companies together. And we were a company called Engage. And then everything, just like everything in the industry, the bottom fell out. And then I didn't know where to go, but I knew I wanted to stay here. So I went to go work for eBay for a little while, but eBay GmbH here in outside of Berlin. And it was interesting because that's where I realized so quickly. I mean, that's maybe like, 3.5 years into my career. Even though I was in Germany working, it wasn't what I wanted. And what I've realized that I wanted is I wanted to work across the cultures and across the languages and across the markets. It was interesting because that experience really led me to understand what excites me the most and was then continued to be the underlying theme throughout the rest of my career.
It's funny, we, kind of going back to the culture piece. It's funny, I remember, this is post iPhone release or invention or whatever you want to call it. And I remember looking at US stats for iPhone versus Android penetration rates. And one of the stats I researched in APAC in particular was how dominant Android was, and that people had like an average of like 1.6 phones per person. Like everybody had 2 phones. I will never understand why, but I remember like, oh, okay, well, it might be, one's personal, one's business. Everybody uses the business so that they don't get a big phone bill. Because at the time you were being charged for every, SMS or every text message. Data plans were expensive. So people were using their work phones more than their personal, but they had to keep them separate for whatever reason. But I remember just strange research that I had found across mostly like, Singapore, like affluent communities in Singapore had that quite a bit too. Like very heavy Android usage, very heavy phone to user penetration rates. Like it was very different world.
Yeah.
Well, here we had one phone,
Yeah.
One phone. That was it. What do you feel like was the biggest, highlight for you? Obviously an acquisition and now being a part of Dun Bradstreet is huge. It's 165 million is no joke. How has that been, exciting for you? Would you say that's the biggest highlight you have in your career? I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, one of them, I think there's the highlights that led up to it, by far, obviously that's at least to date, but definitely all those highlights of, doing that, taking that leap, making that move and getting those first shots. I'm always so thankful to the people who gave me an opportunity, even though they probably thought I could pull it off, but they had no way of knowing if I could pull it off. And, those people that I wasn't somebody who just woke up and said, I want to be an entrepreneur one day. I think I was somebody who always looked at people leading and making decisions. And all along I kept thinking, I could do that. Like I could do that. I know I can make these decisions. And, when you're part of it and you're close enough, you can see how those decisions pan out. And then I had 2 opportunities, one right after the other, to do almost like a startup within a startup. For a British search and PPC company, I opened the German office. And then for that company I was talking about before, Adify, I opened up the European business. So it was always kind of like in a safer environment. So those were also really big highlights. Those were great. But now, obviously, yeah, it's been an incredible journey, as you know, with lots of highs and lots of lows and everything in between. But this is definitely the high of the high points. And it's been incredibly, educational and growth experience for me, because I think it's so interesting. You think the job is done when you sell the company, but integration is no joke. That is hard. And I would argue it's almost harder than actually selling the company, because, no founder wants to see their company get acquired and not succeed within its new home. And so what I've been, I don't think I worked any less the last years since we were acquired, just because you work so hard to make sure that all of the education takes place, that all of, the people find the right, that we continue to grow the teams correctly. And how do you realize all the synergies that should be there from bringing these companies together, whether that's from sales and go-to-market teams or any sort of those integration touch points? And to be honest with you, it's much more complex than I ever thought it would be. But I think this is the thing. It's all down to the people, right? And I think if you have the right teams behind it, and, I think we've been very lucky to join that D&B family, because it's just, they're really smart data-driven folks who know the data space incredibly well. And they were really happy to have us as the talent to come in and help grow their digital offerings. It's really exciting for me because now, we not only have the IOTA business, that obviously is continuing to build and grow, but our team's getting their hands on actual data that belong, the data assets that sit within D&B and really building next generation B2B data products is awesome. It's really fun. So yeah, it's been great. It's a lot of, like I said, a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. There's no like island somewhere where you just sit back and you just, watch everything integrate magically. It's a lot of work.
Can I just keep that thought in my head though? Just that if something ever happens and I am acquired, that I am sitting on a beach drinking a pina colada, relaxing, not caring anymore about paying kids' tuition.
I mean, the thing is, eventually maybe that day comes, right? Eventually that day comes.
The entrepreneurs that I know are like they don't stop.
Yeah.
Like people, I'm like, you had a great exit. You've made a ton of money. You have more than enough to support yourself and probably the next 2 generations to live comfortably. And they're like, we want to start something and we're willing to risk money and time. And I'm like, why? Like, go relax, go buy a boat, hang out, go fishing, like spend time with your spouse and live a good life. But I think it is.
I think that can get pretty boring though. I mean, as beautiful as it sounds.
I want to try it.
Okay.
I want to try it.
That's fair enough.
I'll give it a shot for 6 months. And then after I'm sunburned and tan, I'll figure it out after that. What do you think is the future of audience data? Like I talk a lot about, regulation changes. I talk a lot about, opt-in data and how that plays a role in the industry. You're obviously very focused on B2B, which is different than other companies in the market. But where do you see things going in terms of audience data and how is that going to progress and improve over time?
I would say we're equally split in between B2B and B2C, so in between the various products that we have from the classic IOTA business and the NetWise business, which was acquired at the same time that links business and consumer identity and the D&B business data assets. And, what I see is this is really just the beginning. And, everybody, has their own opinions about what cookie deprecation means, but from the data space, it's actually one of the areas that can be extremely adaptable. If you think about data, the data is separate from the ad delivery and data is collected in many, many different ways. So you have data and, as from the IOTA marketplace, we work with lots of different data companies that range from market research to consumer offline data to research companies to your standard, online providers and app companies. So there's such a huge variety in the incoming IDs that drive those data assets. And then, what becomes a core part of the offering is the linkage in between IDs, right? So it's on the one hand, it's all the data incoming on various IDs that we have. And then the ability to link those across other identifiers that can be used to actually activate those for campaigns or, analytics purposes. So the cookies are a part of it, but I don't see the world where it impacts data as deeply as some other areas of the ecosystem. And I think what I really am excited about is, and this is what I think, one of the positives that cookieless cookie deprecation has driven is accelerated brand maturity when it comes to data. So I think that push, it's one of the things you hear all the time. And are they all the way there? Probably not. But if you look at it as a whole, brands are much more mature now in their understanding and management of their own data, which then in turn opens the door and large opportunities for what can we actually do with that data and how can we collaborate with that data and how can we enrich their data with data that we're powering either from the D&B data assets or from all the companies we work with through IOTA. If you look at clean rooms and data usage through cloud and CDPs, they're not big revenue generators for a data company like ours today, but I see that changing over the course of the next couple of years since this maturity is is now here, right? So like now, 2 years ago, we actually had a product called IOTA Enrich that we brought to market in like 2019. It was conceptually exactly the same thing. And it's when DMPs were big and right before the announcement of cookie deprecation. So that kind of, derailed what did data enrichment look like until they figured out, okay, where are we going to house our first party data? How do we pull that all together? So I think I'm actually very bullish and very excited about where the data space is going over the course of the next couple of years.
And what do you think in our industry overall? It could be, the data and audience sector, or where do you think we're heading, and what do you think really has tailwinds behind it when it comes to I guess, programmatic advertising and digital advertising overall?
I think in terms of data, I think it's you don't want to say it sounds a little cliche when I say this, but I think that the couple biggest growth areas we see beyond using, licensing data for enrichment is one use case, enrichment, whether that's for measurement, analytics, modeling. I think that's one big area. And, we just see all of these pretty early stage channels that are exploding right now, whether that's CTV or digital out of home. What does data application look like? And we're really just at the infancy in understanding how is data going to be applied? What types of audiences do advertisers want to use in those environments? So there's, I think those are some of the key areas that we'll see a lot of growth from.
Amazing. Well, this brings us to the end of the episode, and Kristina, I really want to thank you for being here today. I know it's so fast, and thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your time, and good luck to you and DNB.
Of course. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Same here. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the AdTechGod Pod, a podcast for the people, about the people that make AdTech great. Stay connected with me for more insights, trends, and interviews in the realm of AdTech. Don't miss out on our latest updates, so follow me on X, Instagram, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't forget, ATG Slack community has insights, networking opportunities, and jobs. Keep the conversation going and stay at the forefront of AdTech innovation.